The Britain's Got Talent studio carried its familiar Wednesday afternoon energy as Simon Cowell settled into his judge's chair for what he anticipated would be another routine day of auditions. It was a warm July afternoon in 2024, and the iconic red curtains framed the stage where countless dreams had been both realized and shattered over the years. Simon adjusted his signature black t-shirt and took a sip of his tea, mentally preparing himself for the parade of hopeful performers that awaited. At 64 years old, Simon had achieved unprecedented success in the entertainment industry, accumulating wealth, power, and global recognition that most people could only dream of. Yet beneath the surface of his professional achievements lay a profound emotional emptiness that he had been carefully concealing from everyone around him. The truth was that Simon's intimidating persona and ruthless business practices had gradually eroded his ability to form genuine personal relationships, leaving him surrounded by employees, business associates, and sycophants, but utterly devoid of authentic friendship. 7-year-old Isabella Rodriguez from Manchester was not scheduled to perform. She had come to watch the taping with her grandfather, Carlos Rodriguez, a retired sociology professor who had brought his granddaughter during the school holidays as an educational experience. Isabella was an unusually perceptive child, with dark curls and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to see beyond surface appearances to underlying emotional truth. She had grown up listening to her grandfather's discussions about human behavior and social relationships, absorbing more understanding about authentic connection than most adults possessed. What made Isabella's presence particularly significant was her recent experience with her own social dynamics at school. Isabella had been learning about the difference between genuine friendship and relationships based on fear, popularity, or personal gain. Her grandfather had been teaching her to observe how adults interacted and to recognize the signs of loneliness, even in people who appeared successful and powerful. The audition process was running smoothly when a singing duo took the stage for what should have been an encouraging performance. The two young women were clearly nervous, and when they struggled with harmonizing during their chosen song, Simon's reaction was characteristically harsh. "That was absolutely dreadful," Simon announced with his trademark cruelty. "You've managed to take a beautiful song and turn it into something that sounds like cats fighting in an alley. The pitch problems alone were enough to make me question whether either of you has ever heard music before." The women on stage looked devastated as Simon's words hit them like physical blows. Their expressions of hope and excitement rapidly transformed into humiliation and despair. "Honestly," Simon continued relentlessly, "I'm struggling to understand how you convinced yourselves that this was ready for public consumption. This isn't just bad, it's aggressively offensive to anyone with functioning ears." Isabella watched this interaction with the focused attention of someone who had been taught to analyze social behavior. She noticed not just Simon's cruelty toward the performers, but also the way the other judges reacted to his comments, with visible discomfort rather than genuine agreement or camaraderie. As Simon prepared to deliver what appeared to be a final crushing blow to the already devastated performers, Isabella stood up in her seat and called out in the clear, penetrating voice that only small children possess, "Mr. Simon! Mr. Simon!" Simon, always slightly irritated by interruptions during his critiques, looked toward the small girl with visible annoyance. "Yes, what is it?" Isabella looked directly at Simon with those intelligent brown eyes, and asked with the devastating directness that only children possess, "Why don't you have any friends who actually like you?" The studio fell into complete, shocked silence. The question hung in the air like a psychological diagnosis that couldn't be ignored. Simon felt as though he had been struck by a truth so accurate and painful that his entire emotional defense system froze in response. This 7-year-old had somehow identified the most profound emptiness in his life with startling precision. Simon's face went completely blank as he struggled to process what this child had just asked him. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. The question had hit him so directly in his deepest wound that his ability to respond had temporarily shut down entirely. Simon started, then stopped, completely unable to formulate any kind of response to being asked about his fundamental lack of genuine human connection. Isabella, with the innocent persistence of childhood, continued her observation. "Because I've been watching how the other people here talk to you, and they seem scared of you, not like they enjoy being around you, and that's not how real friends act with each other." Simon felt something cold and terrible settle in his stomach, as this 7-year-old essentially diagnosed the transactional nature of all his relationships. Her ability to distinguish between authentic friendship and professional obligation was devastating. "Isabella," her grandfather called from the audience, recognizing that his granddaughter had stumbled into territory that might be emotionally explosive. But Isabella continued with the relentless honesty of childhood. My grandpa taught me that real friends are people who want to spend time with you, even when you can't give them anything, and who aren't afraid to tell you when you're being mean because they care about helping you be better. Simon remained frozen as this child essentially outlined everything that was missing from his personal relationships. The idea that friendship required mutual care rather than fear or benefit was a concept that felt completely foreign to his adult experience. And, Isabella added with the practical wisdom of youth, real friends laugh with you, not just when you say something they think you want them to laugh at. Simon felt his hands begin to tremble as this 7-year-old identified the performative nature of the laughter and agreement he received from those around him. Her observation that his social interactions were based on intimidation rather than genuine affection was unbearably accurate. The audience watched in growing amazement as Britain's most powerful entertainment figure seemed to be completely paralyzed by a child's innocent question about friendship. "Mr. Simon," Isabella continued, "do you ever feel lonely even when there are lots of people around you?" The follow-up question was somehow even more devastating than the original inquiry. Simon felt tears beginning to form as this child essentially asked him to acknowledge the profound isolation that he had been carrying for years while surrounded by colleagues and employees. Simon attempted again, but found himself completely unable to speak as the full weight of his emotional emptiness crashed over him. Isabella's next observation revealed the depth of her understanding about human relationships. "Because my grandpa says that when people are mean to others all the time, it usually means they don't have anyone who loves them just for who they are, and that makes them angry and sad inside." Simon felt his composure crumbling entirely as this 7-year-old connected his cruel behavior to his lack of authentic relationships. Her suggestion that his meanness stemmed from emotional isolation was devastatingly accurate. "Isabella," Simon finally managed to whisper, "what makes you think I don't have real friends?" Isabella's answer was delivered with the matter-of-fact tone of someone sharing obvious observations. "Because when you're mean to people, the other judges look uncomfortable, but they don't try to stop you or help you be nicer. Real friends would help you see when you're being hurtful and would care enough to try to help you change." Simon felt something fundamental break inside him, as this child pointed out that even his professional colleagues found his behavior disturbing, but were too afraid or indifferent to challenge him on it. And, Isabella continued, "Real friends would want to spend time with you when the cameras aren't on, and when you can't help their careers. Do any of these people ever just come to your house to play games or talk about feelings?" Simon stared at this remarkable child who had somehow identified that his entire social world was built around professional transactions rather than personal affection. The idea of someone wanting to spend time with him purely for enjoyment felt completely alien. "Isabella," Simon asked, his voice breaking, "what would someone like me need to do to have real friends?" Isabella's response revealed her grandfather's influence on her understanding of human relationships. "Grandpa says that friendship starts with being kind to people even when you don't have to be, and with caring about other people's feelings as much as you care about your own." Simon felt the full impact of this child's wisdom. This 7-year-old was essentially telling him that his lack of empathy and consideration for others had created the very isolation he was suffering from. "And," Isabella added with the hope that characterized childhood, "you'd have to stop being scary and start being someone that people want to be around when they're not required to be around you." Simon looked at this incredible child who had somehow managed to both diagnose his loneliness and prescribe a path toward authentic connection, and felt overwhelmed by the possibility that change might be achievable. "Isabella," Simon said, tears now flowing freely, "do you think it's possible for someone who has been alone for a long time to learn how to be a real friend?" Isabella nodded with the confidence of someone who believed in human potential. "Grandpa says that everyone can learn to be a better friend if they really want to, and if they practice caring about other people's happiness as much as their own success." The remainder of that day's auditions became an exercise in attempting to implement Isabella's advice. Simon's critiques became more considerate, and he made visible efforts to connect with his fellow judges as people rather than just professional colleagues. When the episode aired 6 weeks later, it became one of the most watched and emotionally impactful segments in the show's history. Isabella's question about friendship and Simon's frozen response sparked international conversations about celebrity isolation, authentic relationships, and the emotional costs of building success on intimidation rather than connection. More importantly for Simon personally, the encounter with Isabella became a catalyst for examining and rebuilding his approach to human relationships. "Isabella didn't just point out that I was lonely," Simon would later say in interviews. She helped me understand why I was lonely. That 7-year-old forced me to confront the fact that I had built my entire life around being feared rather than being loved, and that had left me completely isolated. The conversation led Simon to begin therapy, focused on developing authentic relationships and to gradually separate his personal interactions from his professional power dynamics. 6 months later, Simon invited Isabella and her grandfather back to the show. Isabella was curious to see if Simon had learned how to make real friends. "Do you have any real friends now?" Isabella asked with the same directness that had characterized their first meeting. Simon smiled, and for the first time in years, his expression seemed genuinely warm rather than strategically charming. "I'm learning how to be a real friend, Isabella. You taught me that I had to become someone worth being friends with before I could expect others to want genuine friendship with me." Isabella beamed with satisfaction. "Good. Grandpa says that the best friendships make everyone involved feel happier and more like themselves." The story became a landmark moment in discussions about celebrity isolation, authentic relationships, and the courage required to build connections based on mutual care rather than professional advantage. But perhaps most importantly, the conversation demonstrated that sometimes the most important insights about our emotional lives come from those who understand the difference between genuine connection and transactional relationships. In this case, a 7-year-old girl who recognized that true friendship requires vulnerability, kindness, and mutual care, and who had the courage to ask why someone with so much professional success had so little personal joy. Isabella's question about real friendship became a touchstone for Simon's ongoing transformation, reminding him that authentic relationships require the same dedication and effort that he had once applied to building his career, but with entirely different values and motivations.